Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Great topic for you today. Let's do it. What is the spookiest or scariest experience of your life? Please remember to like, share, comment, hype, listen, and ask for shoutouts, and subscribe. I don't think I've ever had any really scary moments. The worst I can think of happened when I was a kid, probably 8 or 9. On a residential with school. This was probably just overactive childhood imaginations, but it was scary nonetheless. We were staying in this creepy old mansion-type house in Derbyshire, in the north of England, that had been converted into a youth hostel and must have been about 400 years old. As soon as our coach pulled up outside this place, I was a bit creeped out by it, and it only got more creepy as it got dark. While I was eating dinner, I needed to use the bathroom, and the only one I could remember was near our rooms, all the way up on the second floor. The dinner hall was on the ground floor. So I made my way up the 2 flights of stairs alone and headed down the corridor toward the bathroom. The entire floor was deserted and really creepy, and I got this horrible feeling of knowing something scary was about to happen. I was thinking to myself, how creepy would it be if a light just turned on by itself? When I heard a loud click, and out of the corner of my eye I saw one of the other rooms light up. I turned and ran, practically jumping both flights of stairs and probably making it back to the dinner hall in 30 seconds. The scary thing is that I knew I was the only one up there. Our school had all the rooms on that floor, and everyone in that class saw in the dinner hall when I got back down. After numerous other events had happened to nearly everyone, we were all convinced this place was haunted. The teachers actually sat us down and gave us this lecture on how they would take us to somewhere if it was haunted, because everyone was so scared. Probably will get buried, but it still affects me to this day. I spent my late teen years growing up in Vailien, Arizona. There are miles upon miles of untamed desert and wild animals. We have this eerie road that leads into Vail, Corona. It's called Houghton. Pitch black, not one streetlight. Anyways, my buddy had just graduated high school and was ready to have some fun. So he gets home from his graduation dinner, changes, and starts driving out to his friend's house in Vail. He's cruising down Houghton when he sees this tall, lanky silhouette cross the street. He keeps driving until it stops dead in the middle of the road, and he slams on his brakes. The thing is a good 5 feet from his bumper. He starts to feel panicked and honks the horn, thinking it's some drunk. It won't budge. He honks a few more times and revs up his engine. Then the thing looks directly at him and, as he said, he burst into tears. The closest feeling he could relate it to was pure, unfiltered anxiety. A few minutes after, the thing slunk back into the desert. My buddy sped off to his friends, and once he was able to calm down, he described what he had seen. It was unnaturally tall and thin and had elongated fingers. Its skin was almost fuzzy looking, like when you get a smudge on your camera and take a picture. He said he couldn't describe the face out of pure shock, but he says he remembers the eyes being freakishly small. Fast forward 2 months, my boyfriend, now ex, is driving me home. We take a right on this dirt road to get to Houghton, and as his headlights beam over a fence, I see something. It had this odd gait, almost as if it was limping. It was hunched and had its back to me. Its skin was almost brownish-gray in color. The one thing I remember the most was its height and eerily long arms. I instantly burst into tears and screamed for my boyfriend to keep driving. He yelled too and sped off. I was so frightened I woke up my mother once I got home and told her about it. To this day, I'm horrified of the desert at night. I have a handful of stories involving this spunky creature and sightings from other people around Vail. They call it the Vailien. When I was 16, I still lived with my parents, obviously. I was in the habit of staying up way late into the night. One night I heard the faint but distinct sound of someone whistling. I passed it off easily as the next door neighbors or maybe some passerby walking in front of my house. The next night I heard it again. It was clearly coming from the kitchen. I got up and looked around to investigate. Nothing was there. No lights were on and nothing out of the ordinary was happening. I again wrote it off and went to bed. 2 days later, I heard it a couple of times in the space of maybe half an hour, and then again an hour later. At this point, I was freaking out. I wasn't sure if I was slowly going insane or if I was being haunted. Fast forward about a week. This has been happening on and off the entire week, with some nights having nothing and some nights having multiple whistles. It was always the same whistle, a faint, eerie sound just at the edge of my range of hearing. I finally had enough and spent an entire night staked out in my kitchen. Nothing happened until around 1:30 a.m., when a faint whistling started. I looked around and my mom's phone had lit up. She just received an email. A couple years ago, I was walking in with a friend in the middle of Florida winter, and we were about 4 miles away from our home. It's around midnight, and we noticed someone's been walking about 300 feet behind us for a few minutes. We jokingly call out, "Hello," to him, and he doesn't respond, just keeps on walking. We increase our pace a bit, he matches. Now we decide to start taking corners somewhat at random to see if he keeps following us. He does. We're mildly concerned at this point. After another 30 seconds or so, we pass under a streetlight, and I decide to just casually observe behind us for when the guy is illuminated by it, so I can at least get a decent idea of what the fellow looks like. He's wearing a fucking ski mask. I fail to contain my what the of surprise, grab my friend's arm, tell him to run, and drag him along behind me until he starts moving as well. The masked man gives chase. Now it should be noted that both my friend and I were rather overweight and out of shape. At the time, around 5'9", 200 pounds of fat. So we're running as fast as our fat legs can carry us, and we're both pretty much at our limit after a quarter of a mile. But adrenaline keeps us moving until we're basically about to pass out. It's dead silent aside from our panting for breath. It looks like we lost the guy, and then we just hear this loud, deep laughing. I nearly shot myself right there. Never saw the guy after we started running, but holy did it scare the shit out of me. On the bright side, that memory is a major factor in my decision to buck up, lose 60 pounds, and start running regularly, because I really don't want to experience that feeling of utter vulnerability ever again. I was home alone last Easter. I get home from supper at my grandma's and sit down on the couch to watch TV. My friend came over for half an hour as he waited for his girlfriend. After he leaves, I go to leave to watch a movie with my girlfriend. Halfway down my driveway, she phones me to say she's coming to pick me up. I said, okay, and went to stand on the deck outside waiting. My big Newfoundlander came up, and I started petting her. Great dog and incredibly friendly. I'm petting her and notice that she's baring her teeth, and then the next thing I know, she's growling. I've never seen her do that before. She's staring at my front door, so I look up, and through the stained glass, I can see the outline of a person as they look at me and then run away into the house. I shat a brick and ran to my car and locked myself in. My girlfriend and her friend show up, and I tell them I was freaking out and was wondering if I should call the police or my neighbor. I live on a farm. Cops wouldn't be there for a while, and all my neighbors have guns. My girlfriend freaks out and starts driving away while I'm stuck in the back seat of her car. From the car, all three of us saw in the picture window the person poke their head through the curtain and watch us leave. It took me 5 to 10 minutes to convince her to go back, and then my neighbors and I searched the house. The person was already gone. The part that freaks me out is that this person was in the house with me for an hour, and I had no idea. It still haunts my nightmares, and sometimes when I'm home alone, I get so scared that I feel paralyzed. It's terrible. Probably the scariest one was when I was 14 and had my two best friends sleeping over at my house. My whole family was asleep, but we were still awake in the living room. We had just finished watching a movie, so the lights were still off, and the whole house was quiet. The lights in the living room turned on out of nowhere, and we heard footsteps and whistling down the hall. None of my siblings were home at the time, so I thought for some reason my mom turned on the lights without us seeing her, and that maybe it was her whistling. I walked over to the light switch, which was next to the door that led to the hallway, and saw that it was still in the off position, despite the lights being on. All the doors down the hallway were shut. and none of the lights were on in the rest of the house. My friends and I all started getting freaked out, so we all sat on the couch together, trying to figure out what just happened. Then the lights turned off in the living room, but we could see the lights in another room turn on. Together we walked around the corner to look into the other room, and as I stepped through the doorway, the computer chair quickly turned around and faced our direction. We all flipped our shit and ran back into the living room and hid underneath a blanket. Then we heard footsteps running down the hall and felt cold breath on the backs of our necks. We started crying and ran to my parents' room, banging on the door until they woke up. One of my friends called her mom to come pick her up, while the other friend and I slept in my parents' bed. My parents still think our imaginations were just getting the better of us, but there's no way we all imagined lights turning on out of nowhere, or chairs moving with nobody else in the room, or stomping down the hall with nobody else awake. It was my senior year of high school on a warm May evening. I was getting ready for bed when I heard yelling coming from outside. I ignored it for about 10 minutes until I crawled into bed. It wasn't long after I closed my eyes that I heard, "I want to you," through my open bedroom window. I was confused, so I got up and looked out my window. There was my neighbor, standing at the fence that divided our yards, looking up at my window. I was pretty freaked out, and I contemplated whether or not I should tell my parents. But it was dark, and I didn't know whether or not he was yelling at me or at someone else that I couldn't see. I didn't know him very well. We had never spoken before. I didn't think there was any real reason to make a fuss over it. The next morning, I was home alone getting ready for school. I see my neighbor putzing around in his yard, and we make awkward eye contact through my living room window. I didn't think anything of it. Close to 8:30 that morning, I hear my dog tied up in the back of the house barking, and it started to sound vicious. As I'm in the bathroom, I can hear the back door open. I casually thought it's just Mom, but in the back of my mind, I had a strange feeling it was my neighbor. My gut feeling was right. To this day, I am so thankful that I listened to that small voice in the back of my head. We met up in the kitchen. There he was, standing 5 or 6 feet from me, with an 8-inch kitchen knife in his hand. I'll never forget the look on his face. He looked afraid, almost as if he didn't want to go through with what he was going to do. At the same time, he had this crazy look of lust in his eyes. He said, "Don't move." The only thought going through my head was, if you want to live, run now. You know when you have those nightmares where someone is chasing after you, but your body just feels really heavy? That's how my body felt at that exact moment. I wanted to faint, and I'm so glad that I didn't. As I ran out of the house, I remember screaming, "No, no, no!" I fell down the front stairs leading up to our porch, got up and must have knocked on 2 or 3 different houses before someone finally answered their door. My town's entire police force showed up. The guy ended up going back to his house. I guess he was an unsuccessful recovering alcoholic and had drunk 2 liters of vodka the night before. He admitted to the police that he had been watching me through my bedroom window for months. I lived in a house for the first 10 years of my life. As long as I can remember, I kept seeing little white blobs, kind of like mist, and I heard sounds from time to time. I was too young to pay attention to any of it for a couple of years, but once I hit 7, I started to get scared. I began to tell my parents, but they just thought it was my imagination and didn't pay much attention to it. As the years went on, things began to get worse. Doors started slamming, lights started going on randomly, and I began to see shadows. Years went on where I had to keep this to myself since my parents didn't believe me and I figured no one else would. At age 9, I was asked to go get my sister's doll in her room on the other side of the house. I went to go get it, and once I stepped into her room, all her dolls shot from her shelf and hit the opposite wall. I freaked out and told my parents. They believed me this time, and I told them every event until we moved when I was 10. Since I've moved, no strange event has happened to me. I'm still freaked out by the memories of my old house. All right, 2 quick things right here, guys. One, I want to wish tomorrow, the 22nd of February, my mother Valerie a happy birthday. She is, checking my notes, 39 again. So happy birthday, Mom. And also, this next story does contain a little bit of animal cruelty, but not really. It's more self-defense, but and it's toward the end. But anyway, if you are super sensitive to it, you can skip ahead. Otherwise, thanks again, guys, and we will see you for a long video tomorrow. When I was 16, my brother and I were doing some late night work cleaning up a barn preparing for tobacco season, whilst our dad had gone to check on some cattle. I had pulled my Jeep up and was using the headlights to illuminate the barn so we could see what we were doing. The people who owned the house up the road from the barn we were at had several very vicious and aggressive dogs that they would often let roam. I guess attracted to the light, they came into the barn and attacked us. My brother was up in the first tier, already moving some tobacco sticks, and I was on the ground handing bundles up. When the dogs came into the barn, at first it was just one, this large German shepherd, and he stood and just growled, and I stood still with the stick I had in my hand. Soon 3 more dogs emerged from the darkness at either side of my headlights. Because of the shadows, you couldn't really see their faces, but you could hear them growling. I had one leg up, and my brother threw down an arm and pulled me into the tier just as the dogs ran forward. We climbed up into the second tier and basically stayed there for a few hours with these dogs circling below us. They would leave out of the barn every now and then, but we could hear them outside, and we would toss down a stick and make some racket, but they would rush right back to see what was going on. After what seemed like forever, we heard a truck coming down the road, and it was our grandfather, who had seen the light in the barn whilst driving by and came to check it out. Thought it was thieves or something. A few horn honks actually scattered the dogs, and we were able to come back down and get in my Jeep. About a week later, my grandfather was back again feeding some cattle and was attacked by one of the dogs as well. But he was carrying a pistol because of what happened earlier and ended up killing one and wounding another. Still not ghostly or spooky, but it definitely scared us bad enough not to work out in the field at night for a long time. My younger sister and I went up to visit my aunt in the mountains of Tennessee, about 10 miles from Sewanee. We were out in the middle of nowhere in my aunt's friend's gorgeous 2-story log cabin. It was just the 3 of us. The owner of the house was traveling and wanted to use a house sit. It's in the middle of June and hot as hell, and unfortunately, the upstairs doesn't have air conditioning. So my sister and I opted to sleep in the living room downstairs, while my aunt took the master bedroom that was also downstairs. I slept just fine, but my sister apparently didn't sleep a wink because she kept hearing footsteps coming from above her. I chalked it up to her just being really tired. Maybe the wood was settling or whatever it is people say. A few days later, we go to the university's little bar restaurant place for dinner. By the time we get back to the house, it's 9 or 10 p.m. and it's dark. So we all go into the house. I sit down and plug my phone in and pick up a book and start reading, while my sister goes and changes into her sleepy clothes. My aunt is freaking out and keeps saying that all of the doors are open when she knows she closed them. Alright, maybe it was the dogs. She then heads into the kitchen and says that all of the cabinet doors are open, which is really weird because they're the magnetic type that you have to push to open. She's flipping out and says something like, I wonder if... Never mind. I said, you wonder what? What is it? Well, the house is built either really close to or on top of a Cherokee burial ground, and we have Cherokee blood in us. And boom, the fucking power goes out. We ended up going into town and getting a hotel. It was kind of funny after we realized that we were being ridiculous, but we were not going to stick around to find out what it was that made the power go out. About a year ago, I was hanging out with my girlfriend at her house, just talking and passing the time. We were sitting at one end of her couch, which, due to the design of her house, looked straight down a hallway that runs the length of the house. At the far end of the hall, her older brother's bedroom door was half open. We'd been there for a few hours before we realized it was getting decently dark in the house. Not too dark to see, but dark enough to set the creepy mood. During a relatively longer period of silence, she looks over near the hallway and asks if I heard something. After a few more seconds, I realized that there was a steady rhythm of tapping coming from near the hall. Not even the tick of a clock, but a legitimate rhythm. We started to talk about anything just to cover the noise. Half an hour-ish later, a light turned on in the hallway. One of those little motion-activated night lights plugged in halfway down the hall. We figured it must have been one of their cats, as they had two. Over on the other end of the couch was one of them, so we narrowed it down to her large white cat. As if on cue, her other cat walks out of the kitchen, directly next to us. Not next to us near the hallway, or even remotely in view of the light. To this day, I don't know what caused that light to turn on. I still consider it to be one of the most terrifying moments of my life, only because I can't find any explanation for it. A few years ago, I shared an apartment with my coworker Matt and his girlfriend Jordy. None of us have been paranoid about the supernatural or were into ghosts and all that. All the bedrooms and my bedroom connected from one hallway, which was opposite the kitchen. Jordy was in the kitchen cooking something, and I was in my room. Out of nowhere, she calls my name in a shaky voice and says, "Are you in your room right now?" I came out and was like, "Yeah, what's up?" She said, "I swear I just saw someone out of the corner of my eye that looked like a naked man walk from your bathroom to the living room, but when I peeked in the living room, there was no one there." I knew she wasn't the type to make up stories, so we were quiet for a minute, and then we heard stuff fall in the bathtub. Scared the crap out of us, but it was just my razor and razor holder that fell from the wall. Stupid suction cups never hold worth a crap. A few weeks later, Matt and I both had the morning shift at our jobs, so we decided to just ride together. I walked into the dark living room at 6:30 in the morning and turned on the light and saw the new unopened box of cat litter I just purchased sitting smack in the middle of the living room floor. Normally, I store all the litter under the dining room table. There's no way a cat can move a 20-pound box, so I was puzzled. Matt came into the living room a few minutes later, and I pointed at the box and asked if he moved it. He said no, so we were both spooked. And he woke Jordy up to ask if she had moved it. She said no as well. Neither of them were sleepwalkers either, so I moved it back under the table, and we went to work. 2 nights later, the same thing happened, and it was moved to the same spot. Jordy started really freaking out, but that was the last incident. Also related, the street lamp right outside our building always flickered and went out whenever we would drive up and walk by it, but when we passed it, it would come back on. We decided it was a naked ghost that hated cats and went to live in the lamp. One more thing. After we had moved out and I was living with someone else, I told one of my girlfriends about that story, and her eyes got wide, and she told me she never felt comfortable and something just didn't feel right in that apartment the few times she visited us. Still creeps me out to this day.